3 bogeys on my 6. Radar showing 2 more incoming from the east. My fuel gauge blinking red. No backup coming. I was completely alone above the Pacific, and what happened next? Well, they still asked me to explain it, but I'm not sure I can. I never wanted to be the hero that day. Just another routine reconnaissance flight, they said. Captain James Mitchell, 47, veteran pilot with over 3,000 flight hours. December 17th started like any other mission. Clear skies over the Pacific, perfect visibility. The F/A-18 Super Hornet purred beneath me like a faithful companion. We'd been through worse together, or so I thought. The orders came in at 0600. Fly along the designated corridor, observe, report back. Simple. Nothing in the briefing mentioned what was waiting for me out there. My commander's words still echo. Keep radio silence unless absolutely necessary. This area has been showing unusual activity. He didn't elaborate, but the look in his eyes told me enough. 20 years in the Air Force teaches you to read between the lines. I checked my systems one last time before takeoff, running my fingers along the familiar switches and dials. Something felt different that morning. Call it a pilot's intuition, that sixth sense you develop after enough close calls. My wedding ring caught the first light of dawn as I adjusted my helmet. Sarah and the kids were expecting me home for Christmas, just 4 days away. The first hour went by without incident. Just me, the clouds, and occasional communication checks with base. I remember thinking about my son's basketball game that weekend. Funny how your mind wanders when the mission seems routine. The endless blue of the Pacific stretched below me, peaceful and deceptively empty. I was flying at 35,000 feet, maintaining course at Mach 0.8, conserving fuel for the long flight ahead. The sun was harsh at that altitude, glinting off my canopy despite the tinted visor. I adjusted my position slightly to avoid the glare, and that's when I caught it, a brief flash of metal where nothing should have been. At first, I thought it was just sunlight playing tricks on my tired eyes. I'd been up since 0400 preparing for this mission. But then my radar pinged, once, twice, then 3 times in rapid succession. Unidentified aircraft, moving fast on an intercept course. My heart rate spiked as muscle memory kicked in. I immediately reduced altitude to 25,000 feet and increased speed, trying to get a visual confirmation. Base wasn't responding to my calls. Either communications were being jammed, or something was interfering with my equipment. The silence was deafening. In that moment, the vast Pacific suddenly felt very small, and I was painfully aware of how far I was from home. I banked hard to the right, scanning the horizon. There they were, 3 aircraft, configuration unknown, moving in tight formation. They weren't one of ours, and they certainly weren't commercial. Their flight pattern was too aggressive, too practiced. My training took over as adrenaline flooded my system. I checked my weapons systems, armed and ready. Fuel status, 65%, enough for a fight, but not enough for comfort. The silence from base continued, leaving me with the worst kind of freedom, completely on my own with life or death decisions to make. I thought of my father, also a pilot, who'd faced Soviet MiGs during the Cold War. When outnumbered, he'd told me, become unpredictable. The unknown aircraft suddenly split formation, a classic flanking maneuver I'd seen before. My radar picked up 2 more bogeys approaching fast from the east. 5 against 1. The odds weren't just unfavorable, they were nearly impossible. My palms were sweating inside my flight gloves as I pushed the throttle forward. The G-forces pressed me back in my seat as the Hornet responded, climbing rapidly. My breathing was steady but shallow inside my oxygen mask. Years of training had prepared me for this moment, but training never fully captures the weight of reality when your survival hangs in the balance. I had seconds, not minutes, to decide. I thought about my options while executing a series of evasive maneuvers. Engaging all 5 was suicide. Running might lead them directly to friendly forces or worse, civilian areas. My mission parameters explicitly mentioned maintaining a low profile, avoiding escalation. But what about when the other side forces your hand? I made my decision. I would engage the 3 nearest aircraft, hoping to create enough confusion to slip away. My hand hovered over the weapon's release. The targeting computer locked onto the lead aircraft, now just 12 miles out and closing fast. But something felt wrong. Their flight pattern was too precise, too coordinated for standard intercept procedures. Just as I prepared to engage, my radar screen flickered, then went completely blank. Not just radar. All my systems suddenly dimmed, then brightened to blinding intensity. The HUD display filled with symbols I'd never seen before, patterns that made no sense. My aircraft shuddered violently, as if caught in turbulence, but the sky around me was perfectly clear. The control stick became unresponsive in my hand, yet somehow the aircraft maintained level flight. Cold sweat ran down my back as I struggled to make sense of what was happening. Was this some new electronic warfare I hadn't been briefed on? My training had never covered anything like this. For the first time since flight school, I felt truly helpless in the cockpit. The approaching aircraft were now visible without instruments, sleek, charcoal gray shapes moving with impossible agility. No visible national markings, no recognizable design features. They moved in perfect synchronization, as if controlled by a single mind. My radio crackled to life, but instead of voices, I heard only a rhythmic pulsing sound that made my teeth ache and my vision blur at the edges. I tried switching frequencies, broadcasting emergency codes. Nothing worked. The strange aircraft now surrounded me in a perfect pentagon formation, maintaining exact distance. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, my mouth bone dry despite the oxygen-rich air flowing through my mask. What happened next defies explanation, and I've replayed it in my mind thousands of times since. My aircraft's engines cut out completely, but I didn't fall. The altimeter showed we were maintaining altitude perfectly, despite having no power. The silence was absolute. No wind noise, no engine vibration, nothing. It was like being suspended in time. A light filled my cockpit, so intense I had to close my eyes. Yet somehow I could still see the instruments before me, though they displayed impossible readings. My watch stopped at precisely 10:17 a.m. The temperature inside the cockpit dropped so suddenly that frost formed on the inside of my canopy. I could see my breath crystallizing in front of me. I'm not ashamed to admit I was terrified. Not the familiar fear of combat that every pilot knows, but something primal and overwhelming. I thought of Sarah, of the kids, of promises I'd made to come home. Through the blinding light, I saw a series of images flash before me. Places I recognized and others I'd never seen before. Military installations, underwater structures, ancient sites in deserts I'd flown over. It was like someone was rifling through my memories, yet showing me things I couldn't possibly know. The pressure in my head built to near unbearable levels. I must have blacked out because the next thing I remember is my engines roaring back to life, my aircraft in a steep dive toward the ocean. I pulled back on the stick with every ounce of strength I had, the G-forces threatening to send me into unconsciousness again. The Super Hornet responded sluggishly at first, then with its usual precision. I leveled out just 500 feet above the waves, breathing hard, scanning the skies frantically. They were gone. All 5 aircraft had vanished as completely as if they'd never been there. My radar was functioning again, showing nothing but empty skies. All systems nominal, except for 2 inexplicable anomalies. My fuel gauge showed full, and my onboard clock was 3 hours ahead of my watch, which had started running again. According to my instruments, I'd been in the air for 3 hours longer than I remembered. 3 hours that I couldn't account for. I immediately set course back to base, pushing the Hornet to its limits. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to grip the control stick with both to maintain steady flight. The radio crackled back to life with frantic calls from base. They'd been trying to reach me for hours, had almost declared me lost at sea. When I responded, the relief in my commander's voice was palpable, quickly replaced by confusion about my position. According to their radar, I disappeared completely, then reappeared hundreds of miles from my last known coordinates. I couldn't explain it then. I still can't fully explain it now. All I knew was that I needed to get back on solid ground. Landing was a blur of automatic responses, muscle memory taking over while my mind raced to process what had happened. As soon as I climbed out of the cockpit, I knew something was wrong. The maintenance crew stared at me, then at my aircraft, with expressions ranging from confusion to outright fear. The Super Hornet's exterior had changed. The paint had faded in strange, swirling patterns that followed no logical aerodynamic explanation. When they checked the black box and flight recorder later, they found even more questions than answers. The data showed impossible maneuvers, speeds my aircraft simply wasn't capable of achieving, and electronic signatures that our best analysts couldn't identify. The debriefing lasted for days. I was examined by doctors, questioned by intelligence officers, even interviewed by scientists I'd never seen before and who carried no military identification. Blood tests, brain scans, psychological evaluations. They put me through it all. The physical evidence was undeniable. Unusual radiation readings from my flight suit, unexplained burns on the aircraft's exterior that matched no known weapon system, and most disturbing of all, clear images on my gun camera of aircraft that matched nothing in any military database worldwide. What they couldn't explain was the 15-digit alphanumeric sequence repeating throughout my cockpit recordings, or why the sequence appeared in my handwriting in the margin of my flight log, though I have no memory of writing it. They swore me to secrecy, of course, made me sign documents I wasn't allowed to read fully, threatened me with court-martial if I ever spoke about what happened. But after 27 years of loyal service, I've earned the right to my truth. Someone needs to know what's out there. What I can tell you is this: we are not alone in the skies. There are things flying above our heads that defy our understanding of physics, of reality itself. Whether they're experimental craft from potential adversaries or something else entirely, I can't say for certain. What I know is that since that day, I've never flown without scanning the skies for those same charcoal gray shapes. And sometimes in my dreams, I still hear that pulsing sound and see codes and coordinates that lead to places no map shows. I returned to active duty 3 months later, after being cleared by military psychologists who clearly didn't believe half of what I reported. My squadron mates never asked directly. They'd been warned not to, but I could see the questions in their eyes during briefings, the way conversations would stop when I entered the room. The younger pilots avoided flying with me. The veterans sought me out, privately asking what I'd really seen out there. I became something of a legend, though not the kind anyone aspires to be. The incident changed me fundamentally. How could it not? I began noticing patterns where others saw coincidence, connections between seemingly unrelated events. Sarah says I came back different, more distant, more obsessed with seemingly trivial details. She's not wrong. When you've experienced something that challenges everything you thought you knew about the world, it's impossible to simply return to normal life. I found myself researching similar incidents, connecting with other pilots through secure channels who'd had their own unexplainable encounters. There were more of us than I'd expected, men and women with impeccable service records and thousands of flight hours, whose stories had been systematically discredited or buried. We began collecting our experiences, looking for patterns, for any explanation that might make sense of what we'd seen. What troubles me most isn't what happened that day above the Pacific. It's what happened afterward, in the quiet offices of people whose names I never learned and whose authority seemed to transcend normal military chain of command. The questions they asked revealed more than they realized. They weren't surprised by my encounter. They were cataloging it, comparing it to others. When I described the sequence of images I saw during those missing 3 hours, one of them actually nodded, as if confirming something they already knew. That's when I realized this wasn't the first time. Whatever I encountered, whatever technology or intelligence was behind those aircraft, our government has known about it for longer than they're willing to admit. 5 years later, I was approached by a man in civilian clothes while refueling at a remote airstrip in Nevada. He never identified himself, but he knew details about my encounter that I'd never included in any official report. What you saw wasn't meant for you, he told me, but now that you've seen it, you have a choice to make. He offered me a position with a program he wouldn't name, working with others who'd had similar experiences. I turned him down, my loyalty to the regular Air Force runs too deep. But sometimes I wonder what I might have learned if I'd accepted. The man left me with a warning that still keeps me awake at night. They're not studying us, Captain Mitchell. They're preparing us. For what? He wouldn't say. Perhaps the answer lies in that 15-digit sequence I unknowingly wrote down, a code I'm still trying to decipher, one digit at a time. Most people assume I was pursued by experimental Russian or Chinese aircraft that day. The simplest explanation, the one that lets them sleep at night. But those who've actually encountered these craft, who've experienced what I did, know better. The technology one witnessed was decades, perhaps centuries beyond anything in any nation's arsenal. The way they moved, instant acceleration from hover to hypersonic speeds with no visible propulsion system, right-angle turns that would turn any human pilot to pace from the G-forces. No sonic boom, no heat signature, no exhaust. Physics as we understand it simply doesn't allow for such capabilities. Yet I saw them with my own eyes, tracked them briefly on instruments that were designed to detect the most advanced stealth technology on Earth. I've spent years trying to understand what happened during those missing 3 hours. The psychological evaluations suggested stress-induced amnesia, temporal lobe seizures, even hallucinations from oxygen deprivation. Convenient explanations that ignore the physical evidence, the corroborating radar data from ships hundreds of miles away that briefly tracked objects moving at impossible speeds near my last known position. What I believe, what I know, is that I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, or perhaps exactly where I was meant to be. Those aircraft were engaged in some kind of operation over the Pacific, something they didn't want witnessed by conventional military forces. The recurring dreams started about a month after the incident. Always the same sequence. I'm floating above my aircraft, watching myself sitting motionless in the cockpit. Strange symbols flash across my field of vision, forming patterns that almost make sense before dissolving again. I hear voices speaking in a language I don't understand, yet somehow comprehend. They're discussing something important, something urgent. Coordinates, times, preparations. When I wake, I find I've written pages of numbers and symbols that match nothing in any language or code system I've been able to find. Military cryptographers analyzed some of these pages before ordering me to stop documenting them. Their reaction told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't delusion. It was information received somehow during those missing hours. I'm coming forward now because time is running short. The sequence I've been trying to decode for 15 years has finally started to make sense. The first section contains a date, just months from now. The second appears to be coordinates for locations across the globe. The third is why I'm breaking my silence despite the consequences. If I'm right about what's coming, about why they were preparing us, then people need to know, need to prepare. Those craft I encountered weren't the enemy. They were the warning. And if you've had your own unexplained experience, if you've seen something in the skies that defied explanation, then you already know what I'm talking about. You felt that same certainty, that same connection to something beyond our understanding. This isn't just my story. It's ours. And soon, it will be everyone's. What I'm about to tell you has been classified at the highest levels. After years of analysis, we now believe those craft were monitoring a situation developing deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. In the weeks following my encounter, seismic activity increased 300% along a previously unknown fault line. Navy submarines in the area detected unusual acoustic signatures, mechanical rather than geological in nature. Whatever those craft were studying, it wasn't us. It was something under the water, something that's been there far longer than we've had the technology to detect it. The thermal imaging from my aircraft sensors, which I was never shown during debriefing, apparently captured massive heat balloons rising from the ocean floor in precisely the pattern described in the symbols I involuntarily recorded. I wasn't the only one redirected to that area during that week. Pilots from 3 different carrier groups reported similar encounters, though none as prolonged as mine. Commercial flights were mysteriously rerouted. Fishing vessels were warned away from their usual grounds by naval patrols citing military exercises. It was a coordinated effort to clear the area while simultaneously gathering data through unwitting observers like myself. Why use regular military pilots rather than those already cleared for such encounters? Because they needed genuine, unfiltered reactions. They needed to see how we would respond to something truly unknown, something outside our tactical playbook. We were test subjects as much as witnesses. The man who approached me in Nevada, I later learned, was connected to a multinational task force established after World War II, specifically to investigate and catalog these phenomena. They operate outside normal military structures, funded through black budgets, and answerable to a civilian oversight committee whose members are never publicly named. My encounter wasn't unique in kind, only in degree. What made it significant was the direct interaction, the apparent exchange of information. Most pilots who encounter these craft simply observe them from a distance. My aircraft was specifically targeted, scanned, the systems temporarily controlled. They wanted something from me, or more accurately, they wanted to give me something. The question that haunts me is, why me? The sequence I recorded involuntarily appears to be a complex mathematical formula describing quantum-level interactions we don't yet have the science to fully comprehend. Portions of it, however, have been decoded by physicists working with that unnamed task force. What they found points to a method of detecting and potentially neutralizing a very specific type of energy signature, one that's been increasingly detected at seemingly random locations around the Pacific Rim since my encounter. The implications are staggering. Either we're being shown how to defend ourselves against something we haven't yet recognized as a threat, or we're being prepared for contact with whoever, or whatever, is behind these craft. My role in this appears to have been nothing more than courier, chosen perhaps because of my specific neurological profile or some other factor I still don't understand. I'm not alone in coming forward now. Across the globe, others who've had similar encounters are beginning to speak out, compare notes, piece together the larger picture. We're finding patterns that were impossible to see individually. The timing of these encounters, their geographical distribution, the specific information conveyed to each of us. It's like pieces of a puzzle deliberately scattered across decades and continents. Some of us received technical information, others geographical coordinates. Some, like myself, were given time frames. Separately, these pieces seemed random, perhaps even meaningless. Together, they form a message, a warning about something approaching, something few are prepared to face or even acknowledge. The official stance remains denial, ridicule, or explanation through conventional means. Weather phenomena, experimental aircraft, psychological factors. Those of us who've witnessed the truth face an impossible choice. Remain silent and loyal to institutions that have deliberately concealed critical information from the public, or speak out and risk everything, careers, reputations, freedom, even our lives. It's not a decision I made lightly. For years I trusted the system, believed there must be good reasons for the secrecy. Perhaps there were once, but as the date encoded in that sequence draws closer, as more pieces fall into place, that justification grows increasingly hollow. People deserve to know what's coming, deserve the chance to prepare, to understand. This isn't about creating panic or undermining authority. It's about truth in the face of an unprecedented situation. The craft I encountered were displaying capabilities we're still decades from achieving. Instant acceleration, gravity manipulation, possibly even some form of interdimensional travel. Their interest in specific geological features suggests knowledge of our planet that exceeds our own. Most significantly, they've been observed with increasing frequency not just by military personnel, but by civilians across every continent. The pattern is clear to anyone willing to see it. Frequency and duration of encounters increasing, geographical spread widening, level of direct interaction intensifying. Something is building toward a culmination. Those coordinates I mentioned earlier, they form a specific pattern across the Pacific Rim, corresponding exactly with what geologists call the Ring of Fire. Those who visited these locations have discovered structures deep underground or beneath the ocean floor that appear to predate known human civilization by thousands, perhaps millions of years. Technology embedded in stone, powered by geothermal energy, still functioning after countless millennia. I've seen the classified photographs, the sonar images. Government agencies around the world have been quietly studying these sites for decades, reverse engineering what little they understand. The craft I encountered that day are connected to these sites somehow, monitoring them, perhaps activating them. If the time frame in that encoded sequence is correct, we have very little time left before we discover exactly why. I've told you what I saw, what I experienced firsthand above the Pacific that December morning. I've shared what I've learned in the years since, piecing together fragments of a truth too large, too consequential for any one person to fully comprehend. What you choose to believe is, of course, entirely up to you. I've long since made peace with skepticism, with disbelief. When confronted with something that challenges our fundamental understanding of reality, doubt is not just natural, it's necessary. Healthy skepticism has driven human progress since we first looked up at the stars and wondered what they were. But skepticism must be balanced with openness to evidence, with willingness to consider possibilities beyond our current understanding. Throughout human history, we've repeatedly discovered that the universe is stranger, more complex, and more wonderful than we previously imagined. From believing the Earth was flat to discovering quantum entanglement, our understanding has evolved through cycles of challenge and acceptance. What I and others like me have witnessed represents another such challenge. Evidence of technology, of intelligence, that operates according to principles we have yet to discover. Whether its origin is from beyond our world or from some hidden branch of human development buried in prehistory, the implications are equally profound. We are not alone, have never been alone, in our journey toward understanding the universe and our place within it. I returned to that same airspace twice before my retirement, volunteering for patrols that would take me near those coordinates. I never again encountered those craft directly, but both times my instruments detected anomalies, brief radar contacts that appeared and vanished too quickly to track, momentary power fluctuations, compass readings that defied explanation. Other pilots reported similar experiences in the same area. The military eventually established a permanent restricted zone there, ostensibly for naval exercises that never seemed to end. Satellite imagery of the area is mysteriously unavailable or heavily redacted in publicly accessible databases. Whatever I encountered that day, whatever information I was chosen to receive, remains of significant interest to people with access to resources and authority far beyond normal military channels. As my time in this world grows shorter, my responsibility to share what I know grows stronger. I've lived with this truth for decades, carried it through a career, a marriage, watching my children grow into adults who will inherit whatever future awaits us after the date encoded in that sequence. If nothing happens, if that date passes uneventfully, then perhaps I am simply a man who experienced something unusual and spent too many years trying to understand it. But if I am right, if others who carry pieces of the same puzzle are right, then what approaches will transform our understanding of history, of humanity's place in the cosmos? Be watchful of the skies in the coming months. Be open to possibilities beyond conventional explanation. And if you see something, a light moving in impossible ways, an aircraft that defies known design, even a momentary glimpse of something that shouldn't be there, know that you're not alone in your witness. The truth, as they say, is out there. It's been there all along, waiting for us to be ready to see it. What happened to me above the Pacific that day changed me forever. It opened my eyes to realities I never imagined existed. But perhaps the most important thing it taught me wasn't about advanced technology or potential visitors from beyond our world. It taught me about human courage, the courage to face the unknown, to accept that our understanding is limited, to speak truth even when that truth challenges everything we thought we knew. Whatever comes next, however the puzzle finally resolves itself, that courage will serve us well. The skies have always held our dreams, our hopes, our futures. Now they hold our greatest mystery as well. Look up. Stay watchful. The answers are coming, whether we're ready for them or not. And I, for one, intend to face them with open eyes and an open mind. Will you join me?